Hi, I thought I'd do a quick video about my big joiner. It's a Porter from around the turn of the last century, so 1900, maybe 1910, or at least that's when it was designed and introduced. As far as when this particular joiner was made, I'm not exactly sure, but it's of that era. It's got a 12-inch cutter head and it's got a single-phase 3 horsepower motor, but it's also been highly modified since it was first made. The cutter head is new and the motor is newer, but it's complete and it works great. So I was going to show you some of the parts and some of the things that I know about it and some of the things that I've had to do to it. The fence will move across the tables to give you different widths. You just untighten those two bolts. And you can angle the fence down to about 40 degrees, but I really haven't used that feature very much. The really nice thing about the beds is that they sit on 4 points above the main frame. The beds can be adjusted very precisely to be in plane with each other and lined up with the blade perfectly. The beds can be adjusted up and down by turning a hand wheel at each end. That hand wheel turns a shaft which basically pushes and pulls the beds up and down those wedges. The belts between the cutter head and the motor really need a guard, but it's in the back, so I haven't worried about it too much. If you loosen these 2 knobs on each side of the joiner, you can move the beds in and out, which gives you access to the cutter head and lets you adjust how close the tables are to the cutter head. It looks like the original bearings, which I think were probably Babbitt bearings, were cut off the frame, and then a little platform was made to hold the ball bearings for the cutter head. So this is the new cutter head, which I had to put in. The original cutter head, which is the one on the right, threw a blade for the previous owner, which is why there's a big cutout in the infeed table. That came out quite violently, and it scared the previous owner enough to sell the joiner to me. So I really had to get a new cutter head. This is what it looked like when I started to tear into it. It's simply 2 pillow block bearings on each end of a shaft with a cutter head in the middle. I did have to have it custom made to fit. It's a Shelix cutter head made by Byrd tools, and it works very well. I have yet to rotate any of the knives. They're still sharp, and I've been using it for 4 years or so far, and it cuts great and it leaves a very nice surface. It cuts through funny grain really well. There's 2 dust collection places, and they've both been put in after the joiner was made. There's one sort of directly under the cutter head that empties the space within the main casting, and then there's one under the infeed table that takes the chips from the first sort of cell. This is the dust collection hoses on the back. I have a 6-inch pipe coming up out of the floor, and I have that split into 2 4-inch pipes. And it doesn't quite catch everything. It is missing a guard, and one thing I've been meaning to do for a while is to make a guard for the cutter head. My first attempt was to make something that's similar to my Wallace joiner, where the guard is attached to the front of the outfeed table, and the guard is on a long arm from the front of the infeed table and moves out of the way as you move a piece of wood through the joiner. So in making something like that for the big joiner, I had to attach the arm to the front of the infeed table, and there's a hole at that point, so I thought maybe that's how the guard was supposed to work on this joiner. So I made a little piece to infill the bottom of the table so I could bolt the arm to that point. I drilled a hole through that piece. Then I needed to make the arm section. This was a little bit of a prototype, so I wasn't too worried about how it looked at this point. So I'm just using a piece of birch for the arm. And a scrap piece of birch plywood for the guard. I don't know that this is the best shape for the guard, but I just drew an arc and cut along that shape. I needed a little bit more height on the arm to get it up to the level of the beds of the joiner. And it kind of worked. I put a spring underneath so that it would return but in testing it, so this kind of works, but I think we can do better. It was at this point that I found drawings for the guard that was supposed to come with this joiner. And it's a system where there's a flat bar that moves in and out with tension from a weight. And I did find that there were 3 holes at the front of the infeed table, right about where I could put a pork chop style guard. So I looked at the one that's on my Powermatic joiner, and that looked pretty simple to make. I just needed a pivot at that point. So I decided I could bolt a piece of wood to the joiner bed to use as a pivot for a simple pork chop guard. So I drilled a big hole. And I had a scrap piece of mahogany plywood that was a little nicer. So I used that for the actual guard and sanded it smooth. I thought it'd be nice to round over the top of the guard just so it wasn't quite such a harsh edge, and a little sanding. As a trial run, it seemed to work. I have a pin with a string attached to a weight that helps close the guard. I thought it'd be nice to have a little handle on it so I could move it out of the way when I need to. So I turned a knob. And after putting some finish on, I can do the final setup. A block of walnut gets attached to the joiner bed, and then the guard can sit in a hole within that block of wood. And I have a little spacer to hold the guard up just slightly so it'll move. And then to put in a place for the string to go, and a place for the string to attach to. And I'd like to get a piece of cable or something, but for now the string works. And I just have a 2.5 pound weightlifting weight for now, but it works. What's nice about the weight is it doesn't get stronger as you move the guard further and further away. And it seems to work, and it's really simple. I like this design a lot better. Hopefully the joiner is a little bit more understood now, and maybe a little bit safer. Till next time, thanks for watching.